Welcome to Justice Matters. I am Denise George, Attorney General of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Justice Matters is a program aimed to inform, engage, and empower you with knowledge of Virgin Islands laws and legal issues that affect our everyday lives and our community. And we always include insightful discussions with special guests so you can be empowered with knowledge in order to make a difference. Now, today's show topic is about perhaps one of our greatest social crises, violent crimes against our children. Child abuse crimes are among the most egregious of crimes committed against our youngest and most vulnerable in our community, our children. Today, we will explore the criminal laws against child abuse, including physical abuse, child neglect, child sexual abuse, sexual assaults against children, and sex trafficking of our children in our community. I will also address the stark difference between parental discipline and child abuse, because corporal punishment or discipline is not an excuse or defense to child abuse under VI law. Media reports of arrests, prosecutions, and convictions involving these crimes against our children are so prevalent and pervasive that there's no doubt that child abuse is a crucial social crisis facing us as a community. We will later be joined by the administrator of the Department of Human Services Office of Intake and Emergency Services about the stats on child victim reports that come into the Department of Human Services. We'll talk about your role as a member of the community, how you can help in the protection and even rescue of a child in danger before it's too late. Let's now take a look at some of the local Virgin Islands criminal abuse and child victim laws. First of all, under both Virgin Islands and federal laws, a child is a person under the age of 18. The Virgin Islands has a criminal child abuse statute, and under child abuse, that offense, it involves knowingly or recklessly causing a child to suffer physical, mental, or emotional injury, or knowingly and recklessly causing a child to be placed in a situation where it is reasonably foreseeable that a child may suffer physical, mental, or emotional injury, or be deprived of any of the basic necessities of life. This crime is punishable by a fine of not less than $500 or by imprisonment of not more than 20 years or both. Then we have child neglect. Child neglect occurs when any person who is responsible for the safety or welfare of a child, including but not limited to a child's parent, step-parent, guardian, school teacher, or babysitter, neglects a child or knowingly or recklessly or negligently causes or allows a child to suffer physical, mental, emotional injury, or knowingly, recklessly, or negligently deprives a child of any of the basic necessities of life, including food, education, or medical care. Criminal child neglect is punished by a fine of not less than $500 or by imprisonment of not more than 15 years or both. And then the offense of aggravated child abuse and neglect. A person perpetrates an act of aggravated child abuse or neglect when the child suffers serious physical injury, or the child suffers serious mental or emotional injury, or the child dies from such abuse or neglect. A person who is convicted of aggravated child abuse or neglect can be punished by imprisonment of not less than 5 years, but not more than 30 years. Parental discipline, which is sometimes a controversial topic, I'll tell you what the law says it is. The criminal child abuse laws do not outlaw corporal punishment as a means of discipline, but it does not allow the abuse of a child under the pretext of parental discipline either. Specifically, the criminal child abuse law says that it does not prevent a parent, guardian, or person acting at the direction of a child's parent or guardian, with the exception of teachers and other educational personnel, from using reasonable and moderate physical discipline to correct, restrain, or discipline a child. Reasonable and moderate are the key words. The law gives some specific examples of unreasonable and criminal conduct when used by any person to correct, restrain, or discipline a child that are child abuse and not parental discipline. For instance, throwing, kicking, burning, or cutting a child, striking a child with a closed fist, willful and violent striking of a child in such a way as to cause physical injury to the child, interfering with a child's breathing, threatening a child with a deadly weapon, or doing any other act that is likely to cause and that does cause bodily harm greater than transient pain or minor temporary marks. These acts all constitute criminal child abuse and are not reasonable parental discipline. The age, the size, and condition of the child and the location of the injury is considered when determining whether the physical discipline is reasonable and moderate. Note that this list of unreasonable actions and conduct is illustrative and is not exclusive. Next, we're going to talk about the sex crimes committed against our children. But first, I want to take a look at a few examples of these kinds of physical child abuse and neglect cases that we see are happening in our community just from looking at the headlines. For instance, 2 St. Croix residents facing child abuse charges after allegedly burning 2 minors and refusing to seek medical attention. A St. Croix man charged with assaulting a 14-year-old boy with a machete. And it's reportedly that he hit the 14-year-old at the side of the head with a machete, grabbed him by his head, threw him to the ground, and grabbed his neck and squeezed tightly until the child was unable to breathe. St. Croix man was charged with attempted murder of brutally beating and assaulting a child. And the child suffered such severe physical abuse and torture that reportedly was left with bleeding in the brain, kidney failure, and an injured lung. A homicide probe underway in a child's death, non-accidental blunt force trauma to the head, allegedly killed a 22-month-old boy based on the medical examiner report. Mother calls 911 after children tell her of assault over a bath. A man is accused of beating the child and inflicting a head wound that required stitches to close. A woman charged with failing to report abuse. The girlfriend of a man charged with assaulting the child failed to report the crime and to take the child to the hospital for treatment of the child's broken collarbone as a result of the abuse. Mother charged with domestic violence and child abuse, driving while intoxicated with her children and threatening to kill them. Mother sentenced for child abuse in the death of her 4-year-old child, Aaron Benjamin, after the child suffered horrific physical injuries from a severe beating. Now, as for sex crimes against children, generally sexual activity by an adult with a child, person under the age of 18, is a crime, period, because a child cannot give legal consent to any sexual activity with an adult. The crime of aggravated rape in the first degree occurs when an adult perpetrates an act of sexual intercourse or sodomy with a person who is under the age of 13 or who is under 16 years of age residing in the same household as the perpetrator, and force, intimidation, or the perpetrator's position of authority over the victim is used to accomplish that sexual act. For that crime, the person would face imprisonment for life or for any term of years, but not less than 15 years. A second or subsequent offense of aggravated rape in the first degree would be punished by 20 years to life imprisonment. Then there's the offense of aggravated rape in the second degree as it pertains to a child. That occurs when an adult perpetrates an act of sexual intercourse or sodomy with a person who is under 18 years of age, but 13 years or older. And also, when force, intimidation, or the perpetrator's position of authority over the victim is used to accomplish the sexual act. The perpetrator would face imprisonment of 10 years to life. For the offense of rape in the second degree, that involves where any person over 18 years of age who perpetrates under circumstances not amounting to rape in the first degree an act of sexual intercourse or sodomy with a person who is at least 16 years of age but less than 18 years of age, and the perpetrator is 5 years or older than the victim. For that offense, the perpetrator would face up to 10 years imprisonment. It is not a defense that they did not know how old the child was. Next is unlawful sexual contact in the first degree. Unlawful sexual contact involves any kind of sexual contact not amounting to rape or sodomy, such as sexual molestation or touching or fondling. An adult who engages in sexual contact with a person under 13 years of age, or when the other person is under 16 years of age residing in the same household as the perpetrator, and force, intimidation, or the perpetrator's position of authority over the victim is used to accomplish the sexual act, faces up to 15 years of imprisonment. A person commits the offense of sexual servitude or sex trafficking of a child if the person knowingly maintains or makes a child available for the purpose of engaging the minor in commercial sexual activities. And that means essentially selling or buying a child for sex or prostitution. And it is not a defense that the minor consented to or engaged in the commercial sexual activity, or that the defendant believed the minor was an adult. Committing such an offense of sex trafficking of a child, that person would face imprisonment of up to 10 years or to life if convicted, and a fine up to $100,000. Then patronizing a child victim of sexual servitude. A person commits the offense of patronizing a child victim of sex trafficking or sexual servitude if the person knowingly gives, agrees to give, or offers to give anything of value so that that individual may engage in commercial sex activity with the child. Patronizing a child victim of sexual servitude is a felony punishable by imprisonment of up to 20 years in jail. As examples of real cases, let's take a look at just a few more of the public media headlines involving sex crimes against children in our community. Man 28 charged in the rape of a 16-year-old, and the victim reported that he threatened her with a firearm during these sexual assaults. Former boxer John Jackson guilty on all counts of child sexual exploitation. St. Croix man convicted of child rape. A 41-year-old man who filmed himself having sex with a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old received a sentence of 45 years imprisonment. Man charged with sexual assault of children. 2 children, ages 9 and 15. Man accused of attempted murder of a child, also charged in the rape of a second child. High school coach sexually abused dozens of children. The abuse allegedly having occurred over a period of at least 13 years, and more witnesses reportedly are expected to come forward. St. Croix man charged in the sale of 17-year-old for sex. Man caught in pedophilia sting pleads guilty. St. Thomas nightclub operator sentenced for human trafficking, including of a 17-year-old girl. Epstein used VI tax breaks to help fund child sex trafficking. The sad truth is that most cases of child abuse are not even reported. The most concerning thing about child abuse and other violence against children is that it is often at the hands of persons who are supposed to care for and protect children from danger. And the child is not in the position to get help for his or herself. That's where you come in. And if you even expect a child may be abused or neglected, Virgin Islands laws protects you from liability if your good faith suspicions are wrong after the authorities investigate. So you don't have to know, just suspect based on what you see. Report anonymously if you wish, and let the authorities do the investigations just to protect the child. And joining us now is Natalie Lewis from the Department of Human Services. Good morning, Ms. Lewis.
Good morning.
What is your position at the Department of Human Services?
My position is the administrator for the Office of Intake and Emergency Services, and this is the unit where I cover St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John.
What is the Office of Intake and Emergency Services? What is its role in Department of Human Services?
The Office of Intake and Emergency Services is the office that investigates child abuse and neglect referrals. We also investigate issues of behavioral nature, educational neglect. Those are just some of the items that some of the things that we investigate as a part of our unit.
As it relates to child abuse, what is the role of intake and emergency services?
Well, we're the ones who get the calls. It could be during the day, in the middle of the night. Our unit runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. This is where social workers get referrals for abuse and neglect issues, also teen pregnancies, medical neglect, and we're the ones who takes charge of investigating those allegations.
So what exactly happens when a person reports a situation of suspected child abuse or child abuse itself? What happens right then?
What happens is when the referral is received, it goes to the district manager, and that person is the person who is the supervisor of the social workers. And that person would assign the case to the social worker, whether that person is on call that week or if that person is receiving cases. And once we get a referral for abuse and neglect, we are charged with commencing an investigation within 24 hours. So within 24 hours, we have to make contact with the child or the family to begin investigation of the case.
So where do the reports come from?
The reports can come from people in the community who are concerned. It can come from a doctor's office, 911, Virgin Islands Police Department can call us. The school nurse can call us, principals, teachers, anyone who has a suspicion of child abuse or neglect that is happening, they can call us and make a report.
Do you keep any kind of statistics and information with respect to the type of child abuse cases that come in?
Yes, I'm the one who gathers all the data as far as every month what's happening in our territory. Across St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John.
Let's talk about abuse now, physical abuse with respect to children, physical child abuse. What were your stats, your intake numbers with respect to those types of complaints for 2021?
For 2021, in the St. Croix district, we saw from January to May, we saw 10 physical abuse, and June to December, we saw 12. Whereas in the St. Thomas, St. John district, we saw 12 between January and May. And in between June to December 2021, we saw 6.
What kind of injuries, and I'm not going to just limit it to 2021, because I really don't want to connect it with any case that has been public, but I just want to know over the years, what kinds of injuries that are most notable that you've seen with respect to children who have been physically abused?
We've seen in our office, we've seen bites, We've seen where children have been beaten with, like I said before, 2x4s, tree branches. We've seen injuries such as that. We've seen burns. We've seen old marks, new marks, um, open wounds. We've seen those things on children.
Have you seen broken fractures or anything like that?
We've had skull fractures, we've had broken limbs, legs, arms, even organs about to shut down. We've seen all of that.
Have you seen anything with respect to um, situations where you had to take children into protective custody?
Yes.
And
There's times when children do have to be taken into protective custody, and if that is when they're in harm, they're in imminent danger of being harmed or killed, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's neglect, children have had to be taken away.
what about sexual abuse? And uh, I'd like you to reference also the statistics with respect to the intakes in 2021 with respect to sexual abuse of children.
So in 2021, the sexual abuse data came in from January to May. It was 11 allegations made. And in from June to December, it was 8 in the District of St. Croix. Now, in the District of St. Thomas, we had about 15 for that entire year. So, sexual abuse is constitutes a few angles. A child who is forced to have sex with an adult, um, and this could be a female child or a male child who is forced to have sex with an adult, forced to have sex with maybe even one of their peers. So these all of these are signs of sexual abuse and what sexual abuse actually constitutes. It can vary. Um, it could be a family member doing this to the child. It could be a stranger doing this to the child. It could be an acquaintance doing this to the child. So all of those things, having sex with a child, taking pornographic pictures of a child, all of those things constitute sexual abuse. Sharing these pictures through cell phones, that of course is a felony. That is child pornography. People who share, children having sex with adults, children having sex with each other. All of these things are crimes.
What would you say is it's the state of child abuse in the territory?
The state of child abuse in the territory is not looking so good. And I say that because of the not only the amount of referrals that we get, but also the kinds of referrals that we get now and what those referrals include, the things that are now coming out in these referrals. The cases are coming sometimes pretty fast at times, but the situations and what the allegations are and what we're finding is quite disturbing at times, I must say. And, during the pandemic, I had a lot of virtual meetings with different stakeholders and people from all over, not only in the territory, but abroad. And we talked a lot about, we focused on child abuse and neglect and what's going on. And when the pandemic first started, we met, quite frequently, to talk about what's going on and what we're seeing and how we're doing as individuals in regards to this work. And for me, the thing that bothered me the most was not only were we all isolated, our children were isolated as well. And now they weren't being seen in the community as much. They weren't being seen at school at all because everything became virtual. So that led to me not worrying about what came in and who called in and what they said and what they alleged. That didn't bother me as much as what we weren't seeing. So
Yes.
my issue and my concern and my heaviness involved, okay, what about what we're not hearing about? Because our children are not in school, nobody's seeing the marks, nobody's seeing the bruises, they don't have anyone to talk to, they're home all day, every day.
What about just the community in general? What is the importance of the community reporting suspected cases of or suspected situations of child abuse? Why is that important that the community becomes involved?
The community is our biggest stakeholder. And when I say that, I mean that they're the ones that see things before we ever do, hear things before we ever do. And they're the ones who can really, get the ball rolling and get us engaged um, and commence our investigations. They're the ones that we rely on the most. The neighbor who people might say, oh, that neighbor is so nosy. She's always, listening in and taking note of what's going on. Those are the people that, we need to always help us to intervene. Those are the ones who pay attention. And, I usually tell people if something in your gut doesn't feel right, more than likely something's wrong. And I try to remind people to not feel like you have to investigate allegations of child abuse and neglect. That's our job. Our job is to investigate. All you have to do is have a feeling, an inclination that something's off or something's wrong, and we can take it from there. We don't need anyone to intervene and try to find out or figure out any information. It's just, something feels off. Let me try to call and see, and that's all you ever need to do is make that call. On St. Croix, it's 340-772-7119. They can always call and make, a report from 8 to 5. Also on St. Thomas, we have our office there, 340-774-0930. After those hours, individuals can always call 911, and then they would get in contact with the managers, the district managers in both districts, and let them know what's going on, and then we would go from there.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Lewis. And on the next Justice Matters, we're going to be talking about child abuse again. It will be part 2. This time we're going to focus on child protection laws, the response of law enforcement, and again, how you can help and you can be informed to help a child who may be in danger. So don't miss it. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Justice Matters.